I'm thinking average for the money. Question. So when you guys did the preset stuff, it's getting not coming out. So I did find the third last and I found the preset and I set it to the GPI and then I did the first index with the 0 and then I used but and then I did I did what I did for all the other ones, but then for some reason, if I show you that preset one thing, it just did not work on me for some reason. So I don't see it because so no. This is you're kidding me. I think that's bigger than dates. I can forget one colon and like it comes out with 0 inches. It's not. That's not right.
And for on there, you can just be streaming on YouTube from there. Yeah. So
give it the other tabs.
so absolutely, you can bring up whatever you want. Yeah, I got your slides up.
Awesome.
And then pull up anything. And just the YouTube's up as well there.
Okay. Fantastic. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, John.
We started 10, 15.
15 approximately. Yeah. Whenever you're ready, then rush.
Excellent.
Yep.
So. Here.
Where are you from, Christian?
Connecticut, southwestern Connecticut. Like
Okay.
right on the New York border.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Whose dog is that?
It's not. Big winter storm.
Good. That's good.
Excited for, I like the remix next year. That's good.
Yeah, I believe that.
No, my question is always, what's it looking like?
Yeah,
So well.
I believe that.
That's Christian, how are you? I love dogs. I don't have one, but I want one. Here it is. What's the name of the dog? Chino. Oh, you miss your dog?
Yeah. He's not the only one.
Oh, he's not the only one to have. Oh. Yeah, there. They want to get a part of that picture. So they get it. Yeah, as long as it's all fixed and then like, I don't know if you're done, like back to the back to normal. Yeah. But then the funny part is like you have to have them all together for a picture. So it's not like they don't even know we're taking a picture. They're like, yeah, but they don't understand. They don't understand people. They don't understand what. All they want is their own personal space. So I'm not gonna hold them together like that. It's like I know, right? Just waiting for someone to make the wrong set them up. I know what it is. What do you guys? I think they said that getting a song on the Geo. I was trying. For the times too, I made a mistake. And I tweaked a song on 0 for that preset.
Well, I already.
Yeah, so I use rolling lines. I said the 12 hour, and then I did that. Yeah, I did everything I did for all the other parts. And then I set the index. I guess I had first piece of index. He bracket 0, and then I did This is what I did for the second part, I took the values and I did the left, and then. Yeah, I did the left, and then on each line, and I returned the sum, and the sum is 0, which is very. Unbiased.
Try to print down the difference of the price values and see what's actually stored in the project. Want to make sure it's storing the right thing.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, it did. No, I don't know. Yeah, so it's gonna be right now. Yes, like that, and you know something.
You never tell how to see, yeah, let's try that, you're right, you got a point.
It's website. I don't know. Yes. That's what I heard.
I think watching your keep happens, yeah, that's probably is part of your positive it. Oh, interesting, it did bring up right kid. That is not how to do that. I think you had trouble finding the digits.
Exactly.
So-
Yeah, there's a lot of string is in the it's not saving values on the string. It's like you want to. Bring numbers. And they convert.
Oh, yeah, I think that's kind of.
Well, you just say, it's just one.
Hey, this coming out with a bracket. Oh, wait, you need to like.
We had to put your projects. Okay, the time for them.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I did.
Because I made that, I said, well, like, it's not.
Mhm.
Before I even put it on. Yeah, right, so.
Literally, oh, literally what? Because if you. We're gonna just find. I don't know, there's just something small that has to be happening, it's actually not even huge. Ah. What is there, I was like, oh. That's fine. But we just find that. But we just find something. There's one, because I don't think it's the original way, I think that makes me. These are one. And you print it out, yeah. You get something that is, you know, I think thinking about this not be stored. Yep, it's probably that's just how. Maybe. But
Yeah, glad to be here.
Yes. Doing well, are you just walk out?
I'm heading in. It is all my very short. Hey, Rob. How you doing? Good to see you. Bill? It's good to see you again. Saw Bill in this classroom or in his office a minute ago. How are you guys all doing today? Good.
how are you doing?
Doing well. Is there any sense waiting longer? Or should we get started?
Wait another like minute.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
You guys, just a whole big cross section of first through fourth year and beyond, or are you mainly midway at the latter stages of your time here?
Big collection. I think.
Yeah.
It's third year.
You guys mainly in campus weather service? Most of you guys? Good. who traveled the farthest to come to college? I'm always interested in this kind of thing.
I'm 2.5 hours away. Definitely not far.
Yeah,
I was like 7.5, 8.
okay. Where'd you come from? New Hampshire. New Hampshire. Cool. I can't believe it. Worse. How are you? Good to see you.
Thank you for being here.
No, I'm glad to be here. Just glad to get the invite. Christian emailed me over the summer. Yeah, good stuff. Well, I was a student here. I can't believe it was 19 years ago I graduated. It sounds like a math error. It doesn't even sound possible. It feels like it was like 7 or 8 years ago. But I was a Penn Stater as well, graduated in 2004. My name is Geoff, by the way, and I work right up the road at AccuWeather. Something I should do to bring this to life, Christian.
Should be a little remote.
This guy.
Yes, if you press that blue button.
It's a blue button.
There we go. All right, that should be blue button.
Okay.
Yeah, feel free to take it away.
Oh, sounds good. Well, I grew up in the Philadelphia suburbs. Anybody from the Philly area? All right, where about?
Like Montgomery County.
Yeah,
Louisville.
Louisville. All right, I went to the back.
Oh, I was thinking.
Yeah, my cousins went to the state. Good stuff. They grew up in Worcester Township. How about you?
from Delaware now.
All right. Very good. Well, good stuff. So I grew up, we all have things that get us into meteorology, and I fell in love with the weather. My dad was always a weather nut, and in 1993 we had the superstorm in '93, and then in '96 we had a 30-plus-inch snowstorm. So it was fun. But I wanted to talk more about what's going on here, and it's always fun to come back to the Walker Building. It's familiar real estate. So I work at AccuWeather. I'm on the video team. I worked in local television for 11 years between Joplin, Missouri, Lexington, Kentucky, Toledo, Ohio, and then Erie, PA. Before that, I got to work with these guys with the WeatherCom group. We used to have the contract here at Penn State for the New York Times weather page. And this is unpopular news, but now we have it down the road at AccuWeather. We always knew that Joel wanted the contract. He got it. So it's kind of strange. I could walk down the hallway and see what basically resembles my old job. Still being done now, which is really cool. We put our heart and soul into it here, though. We write all kinds of articles, and it was fun. But I worked in local TV for 11 years, and I've been at AccuWeather for 6 years or so. So it's really quiet right now, the next 3 or 4 days. So we wanted to talk about obviously our local forecast here. I watched a few of these clips and a few of these briefings on YouTube to see what they were all about. But things are a little quieter for 3 days or so until we get into the end of the week, where we could have a weekend spoiler for the Iowa game. And I want to talk about where we've been with the year to date and the month to date for temperature and precipitation, and look at the scoreboard for severe weather, wildfire season, and hurricane season, obviously, as well. And then we'll jump in on some of the local forecast, more or less. So this map here, I love, there's so many resources online, and I was struck by all the different ways people presented when I was watching some of these other YouTubes of other people doing the weather briefing, and there's just so much great stuff on the web. You guys may be familiar with this. This is actually from the Southeast Regional Climate Center, but it's by no means locked into the Southeast. It's a great climate mapper, and you can easily run a command. Many of you guys possibly have seen this. You can ask it to tally the number of 100-degree days for any climate site, and it'll just count the number of 100-degree days we've had so far this year, this month, this summer, or whatever. So this map shows how we're doing with their rankings, historical rankings of the year to date. Sometimes you'll see some of these with two sites, two boxes for the same site. The top one with the star is the ThreadX long-term climate history. That'll go back to the 1800s for some of the longer, older climate sites. Where there might, maybe the airport became the new site, but they do some statistical voodoo and reconcile the data, and that becomes the long-term climate history. So when I look at this, we tend to look at the top number with the asterisk. So in places like Philadelphia, it surprised me a little bit. We've talked about the heat a lot in Texas, where it's no surprise to see a lot of places on pace for the record hottest. Florida as well. They've been hot since February and March in places like Tampa. And New Orleans has had a ridiculous number of 100-degree days this year. They had something like 15 or 16. And, climatologically, so close to the coast, that's pretty rare, unlike Austin or San Antonio, where it is easier to do. But I was a little surprised that we have been, we're on pace for one of the 5 warmest in many Northeast sites as well. A couple of outliers in Wyoming are running chili, so hats off to them, but they are standing alone. And you'll notice that there aren't any spots plotted in the west. This particular product doesn't, if you're 67th warmest or coolest, it's not going to plot that. The month to date, it does seem to plot a little bit more of the neutral zone. But we've had a warm start to the month in the Northeast as well. And Texas is finally getting relief, but it really wasn't until late last week, Thursday and Friday, that a cold front pushed south into Texas. They're getting some much needed rain. And it's been tough in the south central US. We had a couple of multi-thousand acre wildfires in western Louisiana in August. That's really rare. I mean, that's typically a humid time of the year there. So that, was kind of a really unusual thing. And now we are seeing some relief. So these trends are going to back off a little bit in some parts of the country, but not all. And here's the precip. What this does not show is the entire water year for California. So I have something else on that. The water year, they hit reset in the early fall before the wet season. Because if they were to, in California, if they were to start January 1st for a look at their precipitation, it's kind of right in the middle. It's like the top of the fourth inning of their water year, of their wet season. So it wouldn't really be as useful as hitting reset at the end of the summer or the early fall there. Nothing too notable here, but we've had, for the year-to-date precip, there have been some funny things. Convective season can always throw a wrench into the trend. And this summer was in Georgetown, Delaware. I think it was the third wettest because they had a couple of really excessive rainfall events. Meanwhile, other areas stayed pretty dry. And up in Middlebury, Vermont, they had some really wet times with flash flooding. But they did exceptionally dry down in the Tampa area. And that was especially true in February, March, their typical dry season, but they really didn't pick up when other parts of Florida have benefited from some rain. And Texas, nothing really jumps out too obviously here, but Texas has been really struggling with rainfall in other regards. I'm going to bring up the drought monitor here. And we had the two H storms at the same time. Hillary made all the noise in California. And then there was that storm. There's a little less notable, Harold, that came through South Texas. And as that paved the way through the Rio Grande Valley and then ultimately into the desert Southwest, it really helped out a lot south and west of San Antonio and Austin. But they're still struggling a lot once you get into central Texas and into Louisiana. I didn't intend to talk about Texas as much, but they've had some pretty notable weather lately. And that's been a relatively big story. But in California, whenever you change the font, we have this Solus font, which is like the AccuWeather branded font that they threw a lot of money at. But sometimes when you bring it up on a different computer, it doesn't have that trademark font. So things get a little weird. That's not supposed to be crossed out. It is huge progress in California. It's like when people put that line through. But this graphic to the right is kind of a fun one. We use it pretty much daily through the wet season to update our reservoir charts. The numbers to the left are the total capacity, basically where we are right now compared to the total capacity of the reservoirs in California. We used to plot that on TV and it's just too confusing because if you're at 100% of capacity, it's like threat level midnight and there could be a dam failure. But for the public, they like to see a clean, easy 100% and anything less of that looks empty. But the numbers to the right are where we compare right now to the historical averages for the reservoir levels. So 100% would be average. And we were down around 20 and 30% of average for a lot of these reservoirs. That's average to date. So it's always locked into the calendar day. We were really struggling coming into the beginning of this most recent water year. And somewhat surprising, it was the third year of a La Nina. Typically, we don't associate Southern California rain or any California surplus of rain or snow to a La Nina. We look to that for an El Nino. And now we are into El Nino after 3 years of La Nina. So it's going to be interesting to see how this winter performs there. But the odds are it'll be another above average rain and snow season there, which would be great. And they really did well there. Mammoth Mountain, they continued to ski until the very first 4 days of August this year. Now, I don't think the skiing was great. Sometimes they like to promote that. I remember a year or two ago, Killington was open through, I forget what calendar day it was. But on the final weekend, there were pictures of the ski slope and it was like a mud patch that you have to ride through and all that. But they were skiing until early August at Mammoth. And I guess the point is that historical average where we would typically be for this time of the year is that little green thing. We're doing better. It's been great, and amazingly, the drought the drought monitor went to 0 basically for most of California. I didn't think that we'd ever really be saying that after where we had been for so long. And I love this chart. Some of you guys may look at this, but this is the tally of, now it's not individual tornadoes necessarily, but they're local storm reports for tornadoes with an asterisk because weather data is never too straightforward. And it's weighted down to, the intent is to subtract some of the redundant counts. You know, if Rob sees a tornado here and I saw the same thing 20 minutes earlier out in, I don't know, Blair County, we both called in, you'll get multiple reports for it. But this, the red line where we are now, it's been an above average year for the tornado tally. And I like this way of depicting these because you could say, all right, well, we're 130 tornadoes above average, or you could say we're 2.5, 3 months above average or earlier than average, because you can check out the at what point on the calendar year do we typically hit 1,310 tornadoes, and that's typically in mid-December. But there's a ton of data on here. It's really cool to see every year since 2005. You can see some big things like last year's 2021, that December event, where you can see we ended up with 13. Some of these, that big spike there with that December 10th and 11th event 2 years ago. Here was their event March 31st, which amazingly was the top 4 event for most tornadoes in a 24-hour period. Didn't really feel like that at the moment. I think that we all often hold these events from April 3rd and 4th in the 70s, and then the April event from 2011 as like unreachable. But the tally really rose in a big way with that March event. And some of these, I get a little less excited about some of these sometimes. This is the hail and wind count, partly because I think there are a lot of changes in the way people are encouraged to report things more now, and it gets there's a lot more information out there. So there are some societal things that are probably driving some of those changes in documentation more as well. You guys have probably seen these maps. I think this is like, it's just entertaining to walk down memory lane, all the severe thunderstorm watches for the year and tornado watches for the year. We had 2 here in central PA. And these things are great that show the climatological likelihood of severe weather for any calendar day. If you change the URL back to 180, you end up back in June where things are way more active. So you can see the ebb and flow of the seasons. At this point, this is not going to be a big severe weather week. We got a shot for a little bit of severe weather into the Texas Panhandle. We'll look at that in a little bit. But there is a pretty decent shortwave that will be coming across out of the Rockies and into the plains. So we have a shot for some severe weather that we can touch on here with some hail and wind. But before we totally leave the climatological where we've been conversation, the wildfire season has been really, really unusual across North America. Totally different contrast between Canada and the US. Back in the spring, you might remember we got dry in May, but April was very wet. When we were very wet in April, we had a Rex block, a high over low, and we were cool and damp here. But for much of that time up in northeastern Ontario, western Quebec, way north of the border, they were just baking. They had highs in the 80s. They were very dry, and that got the wheels turning on this wildfire season up there. Now, the Canadian wildfire data only goes back to around 1980 with good, clean statistics, but this has broken the record for their worst wildfire season there in at least 40 years. For us, it doesn't feel like it, but we're actually way below average in the US. We've only had 2.1 million acres burnt. Sounds bad, but typically by now, for the 10-year average, we'd be at 5.9 million acres burnt. So we're running at only like 35, 40% of average, but it's all about location, and you can have a small, at least compared to some of these New Mexico wildfires or California wildfires, the one in Lahaina there in Hawaii, it was a tremendously deadly event. Even though it didn't scorch hundreds of thousands of acres, it's all about location. And that's why, you can't really just go on TV and say, there's been a pretty good wildfire season. We're way below average. Meanwhile, people are dealing with tremendous hardship out in, other parts of the world. So I wanted to move forward with the actual forecast discussion, but I kind of love some of those stats and things like that because it's just interesting to me to see how things are going. Before I totally jump into the current, this is another great tool, interactive type of graphic here. This is Colorado State's tropical page, and you can see the ACE. You guys are probably familiar. Have you guys taken tropical meteorology? You guys familiar with ACE, accumulated cyclone energy? It's an index that the longer a storm lasts and the stronger it is, the Saffir-Simpson scale, it will produce this increasing tally of ACE units. And we've had an above average year so far here. We're at 107 units of accumulated or cumulative ACE for the Atlantic season here. And this background line here is the average. So it's been pretty hefty, despite us stepping into a La Nina, which often has a correlation of less activity in the Atlantic. We're at 107 units. Typically, we'd be at 170 units of ACE by around October 16th. So we're running about a month ahead of average. And you can see the big heavy hitters. Franklin wasn't a huge news story because it was offshore, but it was a big dog and it produced 26.6 units of ACE. And then Lee, obviously, to no surprise, produced a lot there, 36.8. But again, this is looking at the whole basin, so you can have fish storms like Margot. That Margot is the third greatest ACE producer of the season, and it's kind of a cool thing to keep track on. And I think it's probably the best representation of how active a hurricane season is, because this will account for appropriately these little, a tropical storm that survives for 12 hours. It has a max sustained wind of 40 miles per hour and it's gone. In fact, Harold looks to be our least ACE producer of only half a unit. So that brings us to today. And we loop it, still use the E-wall a lot. You can see the sun coming up and some fog in the valleys. We have our storm moving up the northeast coast here, the residual cloud cover tied to that. Short loop a bit. But it's a pretty decent day for us here as we say goodbye to this most recent trough, and the sun's going to be out for the next few days. As we look at a wider view, bring up the water vapor loop. The X-ray of the atmosphere. You can see all this dry air coming in into the interior eastern U.S. Although there's still some pretty good lift right now for Cape Cod and a lot of upward movement into the eastern half of New England, really most of New England still for now. But you can also see this next trough coming into the west, and also some subtropical moisture streaming a little bit north right now, kicking off some convection into Utah here in the morning. Switch over to the infrared. Another depiction of things, and you can see there's no meaningful cloud cover west of here except for just some low clouds and fog, which we were seeing there on the viz. And we can switch over to radar. Find the precipitation, again, the widespread. Still a soaker into eastern New England. With the eastern jog of Lee back over the weekend, it seemed that impacts were maybe a smidge less than they could have been. I think there was this sense that like the high tide on Saturday at noon was going to be the worst of the coastal flooding for Lee into places like eastern New England. But really, for many of the spots, aside from some of the more sheltered spots in Rhode Island that had a slightly higher surge on Saturday, it was really Friday night's midnight high tide that led to the worst of the issues there. But with this trailing trough here, we still have some widespread rain across that area. And as we switch over to a look at some of the more traditional computer model content, you can see this is going to kick away. Still widespread rain through the evening into Maine, and we'll be watching that slowly pull away. And high pressure just parks itself over the interior east. It becomes a pretty sleepy story for a while. But with this time of the year, it's the tail of a front that we need to keep an eye on along along the southeast coast. So sometimes, you'll have a strong cold front kick through, but the tail of it still, we're early enough in the fall that these cold fronts aren't plowing through Cuba. The tail of it gets hung up over I-10 more or less, Florida, the Georgia line area, if not maybe a little farther south. And when you have a trough that hangs out there, it doesn't take much to get something to spin up. And you can see first closed isobar here along the GFS by Thursday night, by 2 a.m. Well, by the, this would be the 6th 2 a.m. Friday morning, technically Thursday night for the real world. And if we look at the Euro depiction of the same, we see our storm exit. It's actually strengthening. You can see it is wrapping up here. We go from 999 millibars over Providence or southeast of Providence to 994. And then it basically stops that strengthening or deepening as it moves through Maine. But regardless, the tail of that front hangs up a little farther south. If we were to compare the two, pretty similar location, just a little farther south, maybe with the Euro. But then it buckles north, and you can see this. You can see that isobar is trying to pinch off, doesn't quite do it, but either way, we're getting some strengthening for this low that continues to spin, and it starts to spin, and there you get an actual low plotted Friday night. So this is going to be an interesting storyline. There was a time when some of the guidance was taking this west late last week into the Gulf, but other guidance was bringing it north. And it really looks like the northern solution is going to kind of be it, which is not the best news for our weekend forecast after a gorgeous week. But there's relatively good agreement here. Saturday night into Sunday, here's the GFS coming up, widespread rain in the eastern PA with some showers west here, the central PA. And then very similar timing. This would be 8 a.m. Sunday, 8 a.m. Sunday. A little slower with the Euro, but considering how far out we are, and the variability that we get with these tropical systems that initially are basically stationary, pretty good agreement that we will see this thing pull north, and it may even organize. And the NHC is beginning to highlight it with I think a 30%. Switch over to they have a 30% out for 7 days. So there's a low to moderate chance that this becomes a tropical depression, regardless of if it becomes a depression or not. It's coming north, and it's going to bring some rain up here, kind of at a crappy time. Bad timing for us. Another big story is this new trough. I'm going to bring up the upper level flow here. Sit back to the whole time in North America here, or at least the US. This another big story is this big trough coming into the western US, where we're going to see some snow in the mountains. Had a couple of snow events in the highest elevations. Labor Day, they had a little bit in the highest elevations of Utah and Wyoming. Last week, they had a little bit into parts of Colorado. But as you guys know, in the world of computer modeling, the precipitation is often, it's what people care about the most, but it's at the end of this long chain of meteorological reasoning, and the models do better with the flow aloft. So we can watch this pretty short, or pretty decent little shortwave kick through the Canadian Rockies, dig into the US, and then that lifts. But the stronger one, much stronger one, really amplifies this whole long wave trough in the west. This whole thing kicked in from the Gulf of Alaska, and that becomes a pretty decent cutoff low for a period of time in the west. And that's going to bring some snow to some of the higher elevations of the west. And for a lot more real estate out there, this will be their first round of snow. Again, you need to be way up in the mountains. And there are a couple of lobes of energy. The first one is a little bit weaker, but that could bring some showers and storms. The one in Nebraska here, Friday evening, that will be a bit of a shower and thunderstorm producer. I wouldn't be surprised eventually if the SPC begins to highlight that, but it's still day 5 right now for parts of the Central Plains. And then this next one, the stronger of the two short waves that kicks this whole trough east, moves through, and then into the weekend, we're going to have a slow moving area of low pressure aloft right over the central US and the middle Mississippi Valley. So we go from very wide open road with high pressure over the east to kind of a congested pattern. And we're going to have the coastal storm, and then also what was the western storm moving into the Midwest here. So at the surface, we see these Forgive the jumping there to the other map depiction. But we're going to have two separate storm systems in the central and eastern US at the same time. And then another one comes into the west there at the west coast. So from a tropical standpoint, whether this gets named or not, we tried to focus mostly on the communication aspect. What do people actually care about? People do like to keep tabs on the tropical storm tally and the number of hurricanes and all that stuff, but what we're confident in, one of the things I learned here was from Fred Godowski and Paul Knight. They always said, tell them what you know. So we know that there will be an increasing chance for showers and storms across the east, mainly showers and rain as we step into the weekend. Another thing that we can keep an eye on way out in the Atlantic, there is a tropical wave. I'll bring up and this is still days from becoming a true concern. But if we bring up the Atlantic wide, you can see this. We have Nigel here, and Nigel's not a big story. It's hard to get excited about Nigel because it's going to stay so far out there. Here's Bermuda, this little spot of land there. It's home to 60 to 70,000 people, very unique place, but this is going to stay well east of Bermuda. You can see the high confidence here among the spaghetti plots. I mean, there's tremendously good agreement. Not an issue for Bermuda, except for rip currents, and that's it. So Nigel's not the story, really. This next thing, though, would be kind of interesting. And there is this hurricane mapper is kind of fun, and you can play some dirty games with it because this storm doesn't even exist yet. But I circled an area approximately where it will be at the end of the weekend, or at the end of this week. And you can see all these storms that have moved through this area. If I zoom in here, I'm not sure if you can see you could use this little, there's my thing that I drew, which is approximately roughly where it will be in a few more days. And I love this product because you can do things like show me all the storms that move generally through that area. Only in, if we wanted to, we could do there's a way to restrict it to certain months. And you can also say only in a La Nina. So that thins the herd a little bit. And then you can say only show it to me for the month of September. And that thins the herd a bit more. So, not even looking at a spaghetti plot, you can see storms out there this time of the year generally do remain offshore, although there are certainly exceptions and we can't dismiss it at this point. But there are some climatological things that we can learn if we say, what's that look like if it happened in July? Not too different, but there are certain things that in certain parts of the ocean and the basin, if you only plot October storms, you're going to see in the Gulf more of the influence of the westerlies as this year begins to pick up, which looks very different than in June or July, the early season storms in the Gulf and the Caribbean. They often come west, more likely than say a November storm that actually gets shoved east and northeast into the Florida side. We were playing with this quite a bit with Lee back when there was tremendous debate as to how far west it would move or not. I'm putting kind of the cart ahead of the horse with this next wave that has yet to really develop, but it's a cool tool to play with. And just kind of coming back to the fire danger conversation, we're not done with the fire season. In fact, a lot of the fires in the fall obviously occur in California. We often see this annual cycle where the May, June, and early July fires are in the interior Southwest. They may migrate northwest into the interior Northwest for the latter part of the summer. And then we get more offshore wind events in California, like El Nino winds and Diablo winds. They have all these regional terms for them into October. So, we're still concerned about the fire danger there, but in the short term, that trough kicking through the northwestern US is going to be a concern for wildfire danger here over the next day or two. You can see whenever there's a trough in the Northwest, this time of the year before things are, if things are not wet,
we can get into fire danger out there. And from a precip standpoint, there's a little bit out there, but once you get east of the Northern Rockies, it's a downsloping wind, and that's a very dry environment out there. So that's why the SPC is highlighting, they're second out of the 3 levels for fire danger out in central and eastern Montana. And then tomorrow, a little farther east, but it's not quite as significant as you get into parts of North Dakota. Guys, have anything you want to talk about or discuss? Go ahead.
Actually, do you have a question? So
Yeah.
I know from recent talks with the storm, the rain that came through yesterday and the rain that comes through next weekend. I've heard, I'm just curious, I've heard talks that people call them nor'easters. Would that technically be right, or technically just be like it could be like more tropical? 'Cause I'm hearing so many different things online.
Yeah, with Lee it did a kind of a classic thing in that it went through extratropical transition as it basically made landfall. It was in the process that, and even a day or two before it made landfall, it didn't really look on satellite like a tropical system. There wasn't much deep convection near the center of the storm. It became very lopsided. It began to take the shape and form of a nor'easter. It behaved kind of more like that after it got farther north. But I'm interested in any other opinions. The nor'easters are named after the northeast wind that comes into the coastline. And when there is a storm that still has tropical characteristics, we tend to just refer to it as tropically. I'm curious how this one will play out here. It doesn't look like a true nor'easter because it looks a little bit too discombobulated and not quite focused enough. But if it really ramped up, I could see that happening, where people talked about that. I mean, there will be a northeast wind into New England with it. We'll have to see. Do you guys have any other thoughts on that?
There's a lot of rain. Already.
Yeah, there has been. Yeah, I like this. I think I have the link as a favorite place. This is interactive NOAA tool where you can filter things.
ACS.
Yeah. But we can certainly check that out too. The river levels. I was thinking of a different interactive mapper. But this guy serves the same purpose. There's this thing where you can filter by number of hours and certain thresholds, and it goes to the lower level. Anything that would pop up. Some backyard weather stations, not to the level of the Wonder Map, but it has the CWAP sites and some of the lower level, not necessarily ASOS sites. But here's the 7-day. Lee was so far east, though it really didn't hammer eastern New England with rain quite like a couple of the flood events last week did. We had more flash flooding with a few of these less newsworthy events. And even today is bringing more rain to central parts of New England than some of those areas saw with Lee. But you can see a few hot pixels of the maroon. I think this is going to be taking us to Leominster. Looks like Leominster. Is that how you say it? Leominster? Leominster. Yeah. Yeah, they got tremendous rainfall there on Wednesday, Thursday. Pretty scary flash flooding. And Providence got in on it too within hours, the same event. And they got hit much harder with that compared to with Lee. But one of the things we were using a lot as Lee was coming in were the river gauges. And coastal river gauges are always fun because they show the tides, up and down. And here you can see it, Situate. This does not look impressive here. You can see 10.47 feet. Didn't even qualify as flooding, but there is great video of these waves crashing into this concrete abutment up against the coastline there. And even without flooding, they'll get tremendous waves. It's always kind of fun to watch. But some of the flooding was a little bit more notable. Some of the Rhode Island areas held on to high water into that midday Saturday time frame. You can see that extra high high tide several cycles back. But for actual river situations here, I get the impression that Leominster's close enough to the coast, the Nashua River is certainly way back down. I'm not too familiar with the course of the Nashua River, but if you ever want to follow a river, sometimes you can bring up, for longer rivers, you can bring up a whole family of the river gauges from that one browser. For example, the Connecticut River, you should be able to navigate down. There's some funny, I don't know. I get the impression that the river flooding has not been a huge story. It's more flash flooding in these areas. And you can see the Merrimack River, all these are back down at this point. And with high pressure building in behind this thing, we'll be in pretty good shape there.
Jeff, did I idea when the last time California had, wasn't in any drought category?
It's a good question.
Is there close right now?
Yeah.
I can't find anything like that historical.
Yeah,
Because they archive the maps, but nothing to like look up kind of.
yeah, I'm not positive.
Yeah.
Go to the drought monitor, then you can do it.
Yeah,
Just go to time series. There's a way to do it.
I see that.
It's doable.
It's under data.
Data, time series. Pick California.
oh, that's right.
No, go back. Under
Area? Okay,
you should be able to pick states. I swear you can do states.
yeah.
You can do it.
Oh, here we are. Your state, now we can get to it.
So
2012-ish. We were awfully close though. In after the 2018, 2019.
what is it right now? At the very end.
6.47,
Okay.
6.46. Find the last time we. And then there's a 0.22 for D1.
Yeah.
So actually, it was lower than that in 2020. It's funny how our memory is so short. I wouldn't have expected that just 3 years earlier. Our long range team, I'm not a long range guy, but Paul Pastelok and actually whether he and his team are expecting that as El Nino becomes more influential, we'll probably see an abbreviated end to the hurricane season. So, we might, by the time we get to mid-October, it might shut down, if not sooner than then. But we'll see. Long range is always a risky game.
So I think a lot of people don't know that Campus Weather Service has an AccuWeather login to the website.
Okay,
Is
yeah.
there any like interesting tools or kind of hidden things that you like about that website?
There's so much.
Tips and tricks you can share.
Yeah. Do you guys use this product sometimes?
And that might be the only one.
I'm going to back out of.
I used it.
Yeah. I think it's what I like about it. There are some things that are a little wonky because sometimes you can ask it to do something. And if the region that you're asking it to do something for doesn't exist among one of the models you're asking it to bring up, an unusual map, you can see a northeast map that I didn't really select, but it is, I like the way that you can easily compare as opposed to with the 4-panel view, you can toggle from one, 1 hour to using the same hour, one model run to the other. You can also go back in time and say, well, how does, I don't know, we could do this for our coastal storm. We just dial it down to make it a little simpler. This is the 6Z GFS. I know it says euro at the top, but this is that's the selection. This actual product here is the GFS. If we were to take the 60 GFS and then compare that to the 0Z, it's a little more meaningful to take apples and apples. So let's compare the 0Z today to the 0Z yesterday. You can see Saturday, 2 p.m. leading edge of precip would be up into areas around Maryland with the surface low close to Charleston. If we go back to Sunday, 0Z, so Saturday night, in 24 hours, what's the trend? I feel like this is a somewhat convenient way to look at the trend. So here's the 0Z. So the trend is a smidge faster. If we go back to Sunday at 2 p.m., the change becomes a little bit more notable. And then this would eject offshore earlier when yesterday it had the secondary low. The coastal low kind of breaks off. The secondary thing lingers near the Chesapeake Bay into Tuesday. So, I guess the trend would be a little faster to come in, but also maybe a little faster to improve on the way out. I kind of like the ability to mess with that. I know that there are other options to compare elsewhere on the web as well. There are a lot of different things you can look at, though. Almost too many options. It's good. It's good to have options. Do you guys use the what's that other product? I've never been a paying customer for it, but what do you call it? I'm trying to think. What'd you say? No, I was thinking of the thing that Bastardi was involved with for a time.
That's
Oh, that is Weather Belt. Weather Belt. Yeah. I'm sorry. That Weather Belt. The graphics look amazing, but from what the limited amount I've played with it, the user interface is a little bit wonky because there's so many options. It's overwhelming. Maybe Weather Belt's been improved.
It's a little confusing.
Yeah.
I use it, and it's expensive, so unless you have.
Yeah, I tend to use this. This stuff's out there. Yeah. Yeah, Rob, I'm sorry, I misheard you.
Wow.
Definitely Weather Belt.
If you guys want to use this, the password username on the sudo dash or log in. I think it's like username campus WX. Password's just like weather. Yeah, very secure. But
It has some nice convective things. There are so many options out there on the web. Here you can see, I kind of hinted at that one shortwave coming out of the west, the stronger of the two shortwaves that gets the long wave trough moving. The SPC at some point will be highlighting this. Sometimes they're very conservative. I don't think they're doing anything for days 4, but at the same time, climatologically, the temperatures aloft are a little bit warmer and there's not going to be as much shear. But I do kind of like some of the convective parameters that you can display here. I don't know of any like top, great secrets that are hidden necessarily, but it's a really good comprehensive thing. I still use the eWall for satellite data sometimes and the College of DuPage stuff. But I do tend to use this for most of my model things. When you first load it, there's a very convenient, it just defaults to this one series of selections at the top. You can go to, I'm gonna back myself out here. Go to multi-loops and then the AccuWeather GFS NAM and Euro comparison. That's nice. It does take you to this product. It's a good practice to also bring up vorticity or at least some form of something going on at 500 millibars, just to kind of keep our eyes from jumping to the QPF all the time, because that can kind of be intoxicating and it seems like the answer key sometimes. But I still use the Penn State eWall for the HER a lot of the time. It's just so convenient. It's right there. 1 or 2 clicks, you're there.
thank you, Jeff.
Thank you guys for coming. I'm going to kick you this week, but it's 4 days of high pressure. I wish you guys the best with everything in your studies.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, John. Yeah. Yeah, you too, please. Should I shut things down over here? I guess Christian will take care of the.
Yeah, I can log in.
All right, thank you.
Thanks again for coming in.
Oh, anytime.
Appreciate it. Yeah, hope for good weather this weekend.
Yeah,
We hang on, rain holds off.
I know, it's always the Iowa game. Years ago,
Yeah, I know.
The Iowa game, when I went to Kentucky, total washout.
A poncho.